This week on Culture Leaders, I sat down with Calvin Crosslin, Chief Diversity Officer at Lenovo and President of the Lenovo Foundation, a leader who has spent decades building culture that works across borders, generations, and business units. Calvin's journey started in the mailroom at IBM. He rose through the ranks not just by checking boxes, but by doing the hard work of shaping inclusive and human-centered cultures at scale. Today, he oversees inclusion, philanthropy, and HR strategy and brings the same values to each role: clarity, care, and conviction. In our conversation, Calvin talks about why culture beats country when it comes to how teams work together, how Lenovo's global footprint informs its approach to diversity, and why inclusion only works when it's built into leadership, not just led by a loud executive with a budget. He also shares how his mother, one of the first Black women in tech at IBM in the 1970s, shapes the values he brings to work today. This episode is a masterclass in culture and responsibility and leading by example. Please welcome to the podcast, Calvin Crosslin. All right. Well, welcome, Calvin. I'm so excited that you're here. I can't wait to find out, what is your why?
Well, thank you, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think my why is my family. I think about my ancestors, my parents. You want to make them proud. Certainly want to provide for your family, not only in terms of financially, but be a role model. And I think for future generations, you want to be an inspiration. So I'd say family, and due to the nature of the work that I do at Lenovo in terms of fostering an inclusive culture and working in philanthropy, I think I'm making my ancestor proud. I think I'm setting a fine example for my kids. And hopefully, like I said, I'm setting a path for future generations in my family.
I mean, it shocks me how few people have given that answer in the history of this podcast. It seems like the most obvious one, at least for me as a mom, as parent. I mean, why isn't that everyone's answer, right? And yet it feels like a lot of the times people need to give a corporate response. Like, my why has to do with, streamlining pay processes, or something insane. But I just appreciate the authenticity of that and the universality of that, I suppose. So you feel fulfilled, it sounds like, in the work
I
that you
do. And,
do.
and to your point about the corporate response, I have a pretty cool job. As I said, I get to
Yeah.
come in every day and try to foster an inclusive culture where everyone feels that they can be successful and that they belong. And who wouldn't enjoy philanthropy in terms of being able to give or invest in our community, particularly underrepresented communities?
Yeah. So you still have a job. I mean, that's of interest to me. The fact that it is July of 2025 or August now, and you still have a job driving inclusive workplace cultures. I mean, how has the world that you're in shifted in the last year with all of the pushback against DEI generally?
Yeah, we're a global company, and I'd say two things. One is our chairman and my boss, who's the CHRO or SVP of Human Resources, have been incredibly supportive, have said that this is part of our DNA and who we are. And I think if you ask most public relations firms, or if you review anything with outside counsel, they all say the same thing. You have to stick to, what your core values are, right? And so I think that's number one. Number two, we're a global company. And so I think what diversity means on a global stage when you have 180 markets and 60 countries where your employees reside means a lot of different things. And so I think, when you talk about inclusion of culture and language, of thought, beyond some of the other things that we think about sometimes when it comes to diversity in the U.S., there's lots of challenges and lots of things that we've successfully navigated for many, many years, back to at least 2005 when we acquired IBM's PC business. So, again, I think I've gotten a lot of support. I feel like this is part of who we are. We have an employee engagement survey we do annually. And the questions that tend to get well, first of all, we get incredible engagement in terms of people participating in that particular survey. But also the highest scoring categories are around inclusion. So I think this is something that's very important to our employees as well.
So I'm interested then, at a global scale, what are the top challenges or issues in the world of inclusion and diversity? I mean, what's the biggest hurdle to overcome?
I don't know if it's a hurdle as much as it's an aspiration for us, but we tend to be industry leading in terms of our representation of women globally and women in technical roles. We have an aspirational goal to get to 27% executive women in the company. And that goal, we started in 2020, I want to say, at about 21%. and we are on track at 25% to meet that goal by the end of this fiscal year. So while I say it's a challenge, it's also been an aspiration and one that we're on track for.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you talk about cultural inclusion globally and you're looking at all these different countries, and then workplace culture, right, is another kind of x-axis, y-axis of culture. In your experience, what wins or what takes precedent? Is it the country culture of an employee at Lenovo, or is it the workplace culture that trumps the country culture norms?
Great question. I think it's the company culture, right? Because
Really?
yeah, when you think about it, again, we have the saying, "Global might, local fight," that our marketing and comms, our CMO uses, and I think that's true. Is no matter what's going on in a particular geography or a particular country, or even by business unit, frankly, because even our business unit have a culture sometimes because of where a lot of the employees or executives are from. So you may have a culture that's an IBM culture, as an example, when we acquired our server group in 2014, which is when I came over. But I think we default to the corporate culture of Lenovo as we operate across these different geographical boundaries.
And that actually reminds me, I would love to get into your story because there's something really amazing about you started in the mailroom at IBM.
I did. I started in the mailroom. I think it was June 7th of 1989. Yes, in the mailroom at IBM. My mother was an IBMer. She had a pretty phenomenal career there. We had a great experience as an IBM family, and so it was a place I always wanted to work. So I actually left American Express, where I was working in customer service in Manhattan, to go up to Stamford, Connecticut every day to work in the mailroom, because I had seen many examples of where people had worked in the mailroom for, say, 18 months to 24 months, and they were able to transfer into various organizations, different professions, and oftentimes many different state at the time, by requesting it. And so I figured that would be a good path for me, and it worked out.
So your mom, how long was she at IBM when you joined?
30 years. So she was just shy of 30 years. We overlapped slightly. So she was just shy of 30 years when I joined.
In 89, she had been there since 59?
No, that's not right. We overlap more than that. I'm sorry. We did. We overlap more than that. I'm sorry. It took me a second, because the thing that I was thinking about at the time was I had asked her for a letter of recommendation, and she refused initially, and she was right, by the way. So we must have overlapped more than that. I'm sorry. It couldn't have been that, because she didn't graduate until 60. I think she became an IBM supplemental in 69. So we had to overlap longer than that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so 69, do you mind if I ask, is your mom black or white
She's
or
she's
something
she's
else?
but she's mixed, but yeah, she's, for all intents and purposes, by the US definition, she's black.
Okay, so she was perceived as a black woman in 69 when they hired her. I'm fascinated what her experience was. My mom also worked at IBM, by the way. So
Awesome.
I love this. I mean, it's just funny. So what was your mom's experience as a black woman working at IBM in 69 and in the 70s? I mean, that's an interesting story in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very progressive company. I think she had a relatively good experience for the time, but I don't think it would be uncommon for. I mean, she was a programmer initially, and then she was a systems engineer and did technical sales. And I think she probably met the similar challenges that most women face, and certainly some of
Yeah.
the challenges that a black woman would face, being someone that was an engineer or in the software area, right? Being a programmer. So she had some challenges. She'd come home and be fairly open about those things. But again, I think her progression at IBM, um, and the camaraderie she had with her teammates, I think, was a culture that was inclusive at the time. Maybe not so much as it is today in 2025, but for those times, I'd say it was ahead of most.
Well, yeah, and it speaks to the point that you made earlier that I was asking you about, which is, does country culture win or does corporate culture win? And so it sounds like corporate culture was winning for your
Yeah.
mom. I mean, maybe it's not what, obviously, it wasn't what it is in 2025, but I mean, to have a black female systems, engineer or whatever she was,
Mhm.
that's pretty remarkable. I mean, I can't, my mom said she had a really great experience at IBM. She loved it. She was working there in the 60s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it doesn't surprise me, right? That's the stories I've heard in my family.
Yeah, IBM has a rich history. I think if you look back to even the state of North Carolina when we built a large presence here, at that time, there were stories that would say that um, IBM CEO was very influential in having a much more integrated workplace than probably would have been the norm when we built the large presence here in the Raleigh or RTP area.
Mm. So tell me about the philanthropy side. How does that work? Do you have a budget? How do you decide where the money goes? I mean, what's the architecture of philanthropy at Lenovo?
Yeah, we do have a budget, but we also have very generous executives who have things that are near and dear to their heart. So there are things that we get involved in to make sure that we vet certain organizations to make sure that they have the right credentials and background and things of that nature. But we do have a budget and we have strategic partnerships with organizations that provide various services in community. And we have a representative in each of the geographies that manage those strategic relationships and also manage the budgets that we craft by geography. So we have someone in EMEA, we have someone in AP, we have some in Latin America and North America.
Does the budget adjust with revenue or profitability, or is it how does that get decided?
It does. It's kind of loosely based on PTI, but there are some places where finance tries to make sure that our budget's more consistent year over year. And as I said, many of our business leaders will chip in throughout the year, whether that's because there's something that is of interest to them that they're passionate about, or in some situations where we have disaster relief. We don't do a huge job in disaster recovery, disaster relief, but there are situations like Western North Carolina where our business leaders want to contribute more to our fund so that we can provide greater impact.
Interesting. Can I tell you about a major pet peeve that I have when it comes to corporate philanthropy, and you can tell me your
Absolutely.
opinion about it? Okay,
Absolutely.
I think it is wildly inappropriate and annoying when people with power in a corporation, an executive, asks employees that work for them to give personally to a cause that they care about. I think that's so inappropriate. I mean, the power structures put pressure on people to then donate money to a cause that isn't their own, it's the executives and the implications if they don't versus if they do in how you are perceived as a worker. I just think it's totally tone deaf when people do that. Like, what is your perspective on that?
I've never witnessed that here. I know there are causes that our executives, again, that they're passionate about, and organizations, excuse me, that they are passionate about. But they'll use the same mechanisms that our employees use sometimes. Not only do they have the ability sometimes to give funding from a Lenovo perspective, but we have a matching grant program. So they're able to donate dollars to a particular organization and Lenovo will match that. But I've never seen an executive put pressure on employees to fund something that they want to fund. I mean, there are situations I've seen where people want to volunteer as a team. And in those situations, maybe that occurs to some degree where we're going to go do a volunteer day. But again, that's voluntary. But I've never seen an executive go and financially support something and put pressure, or even indicate that they're going to go do that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes executives can get confused on corporate social responsibility or doing the right thing, the volunteerism, right? Trying to help drive fulfillment. And they think, like, oh, I'm going to give to this cause. I'll tell everyone I'm fundraising and ask them to give. And then I will have done something, quote, positive for the culture. But actually, as someone who was not paid that much and asked by my boss to give to a cause that had nothing to do with me, some kind of disease that I had never even heard of. I just remember being like, this feels really gross. Like I have to give now, otherwise she's going to get mad at me. So anyway, an interesting corporate dilemma that probably some people have experienced, but good to hear you don't hear about that at Lenovo. So how has the culture evolved? You've been there so long. I mean, tell me what shifts have taken place in the 30 years.
Yeah, I've only been here 11. So while my
Oh,
yeah, I get credit for combined service because I was part of an acquisition, but I came over in the second acquisition. So most people are familiar with 2005 when we acquired IBM's PC business. I came over in 2014 when we acquired IBM's server business. And so I have an 11-year experience here, but I will tell you because my predecessor was my mentor and my sponsor, and now is a very dear friend of mine that at least from 2005, we've had a very, very inclusive culture, starting with her moving from Austin, Texas. She's a black female, by the way, moving from Austin, Texas to Beijing and our what is at the time our now our CMO was our chief HR officer. Gina moved here to the US, and there's a book that they wrote, The Lenovo Way, and it is about the culture of mixing East with West, and this, what I guess you could call David absorbing Goliath in terms of the IBM business. So this is something we've been focused on for many, many years. Again, this diversity of culture and language and thought that excuse me, Yolanda, my predecessor, started putting more of the traditional parameters around probably around 2016ish. Because we've done a number of acquisitions, again, IBM, Motorola, and some others. There's also melding corporate cultures, right? And so we've been at this for a long time. We've been at navigating across borders a long time, and Yolanda put in some more measures around things like race and ethnicity around, like I said, the 2016 timeframe, if I remember correctly. But my experience here has been, it's always been a very inclusive culture. I noticed immediately when I came to work here how collaborative people were. And so I think that I jokingly tell people, even if I were not here, if things like strategy, things like programs might be different. But I think our culture really is organic, and that people really are collaborative in nature and very welcoming in nature.
I'm interested then what your day to day looks like. I mean, so tell me what it is that you do. You wake up and then what?
It's funny, I have three roles. We typically talk a lot about my role as the chief inclusion officer and my role as the president of the foundation. But I also have another role, which is VP of HR for our corporate functions, which simply means that I have HR generalist responsibility for our chief legal officer and our chief security slash responsible AI officer. So my day varies dramatically. And so I typically change that hat throughout the day. I may start the day with, I'm meeting with an external consultant or a partner on some of the inclusion work, thinking about what our goals are going to be for our next generation of goals, which will time out next at the end of this fiscal year. So, what are we going to focus on in the next generation of goals? I may then have a call with our philanthropy team talking about our strategic partnerships and philanthropic giving. And then I may have something that I'm dealing with from an HR generalist perspective. That maybe that's right now we're going through our succession planning cycle. So we're having meetings around the next generation of talent and succession planning, organizational health. So my hat kind of churns throughout the day based on my role. So
Mm, that's interesting. So it feels intentional that the businesses that you support, the lines of business within Lenovo, are legal and security or ethics. What was the second one?
security and our responsible AI. Yeah. So it is.
Responsible AI. That's tied, right? I mean, as the head of the foundation and as the head of inclusion, I mean, those are two departments that you want to kind of keep redirecting towards those objectives, right? So it's not like you weren't assigned to the marketing group, you were assigned to these specific groups intentionally, right? How do you see that overlapping?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right, it does. I mean, there's while legal is my client, so to speak, in many instances, I also consult legal oftentimes on many of the things
Right.
that we do, right? And so you're right, there's overlap there. There's certainly overlap with AI and with security, particularly when you think about our inclusive product design office and the way we go about assessing products to make sure that there is no bias in them, and that they're accessible when we release them to the marketplace. So there is a lot of overlap that's intentional. And frankly, there is a lot of overlap with marketing as well, because the philanthropy team, most of those professionals have a marketing and comms background. So part of what we do is the work that we do in community, but part of it is how did you tell the story, right? So that your employees are proud of the work that you're doing, because that tends to have a cyclical nature as well. Employees hear about the great things that we're doing, they want to be involved, and so they increase their involvement and engagement, and so it builds on itself.
Yeah, I've always believed, I wrote an article about this 10 years ago in a local magazine called Comstocks, that brand and culture are the same thing. They're just the two sides of the window, right? Brand is looking in and culture is looking out, but you have brand and culture alignment eventually at all times, right? Like I think about the story I told in that article was about Wells Fargo, where they had this brand of being this super old-fashioned, loyal, trustworthy, company, but then the reality of how they were incentivizing employee behaviors came out as being quite sharky and unethical, and suddenly the brand switched overnight, right? So those two things have to be in sync. So that's what you're talking about with marketing, right?
Yeah, I mean, to your point about the employee experience, right? If you're going to tout that your culture is a certain way, and you go and recruit individuals, and when they arrive, if that's not the experience they have, then you have a disconnect between, like you said, that external brand image versus your internal employee experience.
Right. So tell me what's going on in responsible AI at Lenovo. I mean, what are the big head scratchers right now that you're focused on?
Yeah, we have a responsible AI committee that we formed in 2022, and it's morphing and growing. But it really is responsible for reviewing. As you probably know, many companies are encouraging because there's no reason not to encourage people to use AI platforms. But there's a responsible way to do that, whether you're talking about using it or whether you're talking about developing it. And so, very similar to how we look at things through the lens of the inclusive product design office, making sure there's no bias, making sure you have diverse teams working on things, making sure that you're vetting things from the design phase versus waiting to the delivery or release phase. Those are all the things that the responsible AI committee does. And so there's representatives from the business unit, there's representatives from legal, there's representatives from HR like myself. I'm actually on that committee. And of course, there's designers and engineers. And so again, what we try to be thoughtful about is as we design things, making sure that there's no bias and making sure that they're accessible early on in that process versus waiting till till we deliver those products.
Making sure there's no bias is so hard. I mean, I have been studying and teaching about unconscious bias since my first book came out. And I mean, like I was reading about you and you're into motorcycles, right?
I am. I am.
You're a motorcycle guy. I see that and I'm like, I'm going to love him because I'm into motorcycles. That's bias. I mean, that has nothing to do with anything. And yet I see that and I think it's like if we went to the same school, right? I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, he's a badger. I love badgers. And that's bias. It shows up. And even if it's positive in that particular light, it can be so counterproductive, especially at the AI level. So, what do you ride?
Oh, that's a great question. So, two things really quickly. You're right. We're all biased, and I mean, we're bombarded with different images, and so you're right. Even if it's association bias, as you're describing, we all are. And so, but how do you check yourself throughout that process? But I ride two things. So I race an R1 Yamaha R1, and I race a Aprilia RS 660.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And what is this thing about you give people motorcycles or you like pass down? What is this give it back thing that I read about?
Oh, I don't know. That may not be connected to motorcycles other than my son. My son and I typically, my son races. Actually, that's him on the wall back there. And so for many, many years, because we both talk a lot of trash, we've always tried to have equally prepared motorcycles so that when we go off and we race together or we play whatever we're doing, no one has an excuse of why they got beat that day. Um,
Right.
and and I have oftentimes built motorcycles for myself that, he's broke kid. So I like, well, you can have that one or you can ride it and I'll maintain it because I want to make sure he's on the safest equipment he can have. And if you give a broke kid a motorcycle, it's probably not going to be very safe for very long. So maybe that might be the
That might
reference.
be what I was
Yeah,
reading. Yeah.
yeah. And my baby son, he's 11. He does have my 28-year-old son's first motorcycle. So that might be it as well.
Oh, okay. Have you ever dabbled in sidecars?
I have not.
Ah,
There's a you're into motorcycles. There's a control freak aspect of this too, where you want to be at the controls. The whole sidecar thing, you're not in control. So I don't know if I
well,
how
you
I,
are if you're driving it, if you're
well
on the
that's true.
motorcycle with a sidecar,
That's true.
right? I drive
Was
sidecars.
I was thinking of the person in the sidecar. So
Right. No, I grew up on sidecars. So my
awesome,
dad, we didn't have a car, we had a sidecar.
awesome.
And so I was in the sidecar growing up, but then when my dad gave me his, now I drive the motorcycle, which the whole thing, the motorcycle with the sidecar attached is called the sidecar, even though it's also the name for just the side part. So
So
anyway,
do you enjoy sidecar racing?
no, I never did racing. My dad did. He was like in the whole Perry Dakar world, and I've worked for executives when I was at Oracle who did the Perry Dakar and other kind of
Yeah.
the Rolex Daytona, that
Yeah.
one. But
Ah,
yeah, no, not me. I like to go slow and I like to be safe. I like to take my daughter to school and she's in the
okay.
sidecar and bring
All
my
right.
dog in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you
My
maybe like,
dad
but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
my dad actually did a 12-year sidecar trip around the world. He like
Wow.
chose homelessness. It was homeless by choice, and he gave up everything, and he took his bike, and he went on a road, and he went, like,
No
everywhere around the
kidding.
world. Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. You can check it out. He's got a his site is still up there. It's called
What is
thetimelessride.com, so you can
the
go and see, like, all the
timeless?
places that he went.
All right, I'm writing that down. Thetimelessride.com.
I'm trying to make a documentary about it right now because when he died, he wrote me a note that was to be read upon his death, and then it had all these hard drives of all the video footage he took of the 12 years that he was on the road. So I'm trying to get all of that together to make a story about the timeless ride.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So tell me about going back to Lenovo. We've gotten way off track. I'm interested in where you see pushback, right? I mean, you get to do all the fun stuff, it feels like, or the good stuff. There's doing good and doing well, right? And you're doing a lot of good in terms of the inclusive culture and the philanthropy. And then also with responsible AI, that's also doing good. Where do you get pushback with the doing well side of things? And how is that managed?
I honestly don't. I'm trying, as you're saying, I'm trying to even think of a isolated incident or example of where I've gotten pushback, and I really have not. I really have been in a very, very supportive environment and a supportive culture. I would be very candid and honest with you, just like an interview where you get to talk about how you overcome it. But I honestly don't have an example of where I've gotten pushback.
Okay, well then tell us how you because that's rare, I think, in the corporate world. So how how has that been the environment that's been created? I mean, where does that come from? The fact that it's so embraced universally to do good and not just to do well.
I really think it starts with our chairman and I think our senior leadership team. I honestly believe, and I think over time, I really do believe that that's just organically who we are. It's just part of our DNA to be inclusive. It's part of our DNA to be generous in terms of our employees volunteering and lending, their time and their talent to various things outside of work that they're passionate about. We do a lot of employee giving as well, matching gift as I mentioned before. So I just think it's part of who we are and part of our culture. It really is a unique place.
Is there something aspirationally that you would like to see implemented or different in the work that you do that you haven't done yet? Maybe you haven't gotten pushback about it, but something that kind of big plans you have for the future of these areas?
I think for both, for what's different, I was going to say more of something, but it's different more. I think for philanthropy, it would be more money, right? I think we have wonderful strategic partnerships. We always see places where I think we would like to and would want to do more monetarily, right? Back to your question about budget. And I think with my inclusion team, it's headcount. I think there's places that I would love to see us get more involved in. We have a wonderful network of things like employee resource groups. We have a wonderful network of people in the business units that help become an extension of what we do. But I wish we had a larger team that was within the HR function that was focused on inclusion.
Yeah. When I was at Oracle, I remember they hired the head of inclusion, and she was given no team and no budget on day one. And what she had to do was go evangelize and advocate for budget from the lines of business.
Mhm.
And the team has grown obviously and the budget is there now, but I think it was because in the beginning it was because executives said, "Okay, you can have this percentage of my budget to do your programs within my team," but not everyone adopted what she was advocating for, right? There were
Mhm.
people like,
Mhm.
"Now that's a distraction." And so it was interesting. It was a very, um, I mean, here was the pros and cons of that approach. The pro was it allowed for each line of business to have a lot of autonomy,
Yes.
which the executives love that because they got to run their business their way. And like one executive is running multi-billion dollar, you got thousands of employees in that one department, if it's not what it was called, but you get the idea. On the other hand, there wasn't this universal adoption of a cultural shift. So it seems like you have the best of both worlds where you have this universal adoption of the culture and then also you get to work with the executives in different ways.
Yeah, and I think that is important, right? Your point about being an evangelist and having to go and talk to each business unit or a business leader about the investment they want to make. Because in one way, it doesn't matter what I say or what I do. What really matters is how my leaders behave across the business, right? And so there is a component of that that I think is necessary, because again, it can't be make it up 100 inclusion professionals running around making the place inclusive. It really needs to be the business leaders that are modeling that behavior.
I think that's the most important point, and one that I've made before is like, you know what's not gonna make your culture more inclusive? Some very loud chief diversity officer. That's not what does it. It is the leadership and the cultural beliefs. If it's a program, programs have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They have a budget, and the budget ends here, right? If it's a culture, well, then it's something that permeates every decision that's made, all of the behaviors that are accepted and not, and the recognition and the feedback and the stories that are told that allows it to continue indefinitely rather than, for this fiscal year, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting that you have that perspective too. But you're still an evangelist, right? I mean, your job is to kind of hold the megaphone and say, here's look at this great story of what happened over here and why you should buy into it too.
Yeah, I feel like I am, and I feel like my team are great at enabling our leaders, right, with the right tools and the right programs to be successful, right? So I do believe that we enable others and try to inspire others to do the work.
Well, you have certainly inspired me. I have one more question for you before we wrap it up. This has been such a fun conversation, but the last question is, what is something that you don't get asked about very often in these types of interviews that you wish you were asked more often?
It's funny you should ask because I heard you might ask me this question and I struggled with what that question might be. And then I saw one recently and I said, that would be a pretty cool question that I don't think anyone ever asked me. And it's what would I like to do with the rest of my career, or after this particular career, if you will.
And so,
I think I would love to be part of a well, actually part of a private equity board and one publicly traded board. I do a lot of board work today with nonprofits. I really enjoy that work. And so I think I'd love to sit on, like I said, one private equity or board and one publicly traded board at some point in my encore career.
excellent. Well, we'll manifest that for that. If you're listening, Calvin is available.
I love
Please reach out to him and let him know where he can sign up.
There you go. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Calvin, so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate it. And it's been wonderful time spending time with you. And I love hearing the story about your dad and going around the world. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, well, everyone inspires in their own particular way. That was his way, for sure.
Awesome.